All right. Hello, everyone. Can you all see and hear me? Trying to turn my volume up here. Okay. I don't actually know if I'm turning my volume up or down, but if you can hear me, that's great. I have to be a little quieter once again because as you know, the weather has been uh defeating me. However, it is quite nice outside, but it's a little chilly. So I think probably going forward, I'm going to be lecturing from inside Taranga Commons, where there are other students studying between classes. So if I'm quiet, that's the reason. We'll just think of this as like philosophy ASMR or something. Okay, so today we're going to continue our discussion on things. What did we talk about last time? Well, we talked about Aristotle's substance attribute framework. So for Aristotle, things are primary substances. I'm a primary substance. This coffee cup, this fake pumpkin that someone's left over here, all primary substances. And primary substances have essential attributes and accidental attributes. So the essential attribute for a human being is reason, according to somebody like Aristotle. Um, and of course, there are various kinds of primary substances. There are the elements, not the elements as we know them today, uh, but the four, I don't even know what to call them, four fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, water. Again, not how we understand elements today. Plants, animals, which includes us, and artifacts. And then we talked about John Locke's view of substance as substratum. This is the one that's going to be particularly important for keeping in mind for today. Remember, Locke says, look, if you take any object and you strip away all of its properties or qualities or attributes, whatever you want to call them, you're just left with this kind of mysterious substratum to which all the properties adhere. What is it? Well, we know not what, but whatever it is, that substance on Locke's view. After Locke, uh, thinkers like Berkeley and Hume came along and said, look, there's no reason based on sense experience to posit the notion of something like substratum. I think if you're somebody like Hume, right, you're a radical empiricist. If you can't perceive it with your senses, why would you posit its existence? So we don't directly perceive substance at all, only these bundles of qualities. And the idea behind this theory, bundle theory as it's called, is that there is no substance. There are just bundles of qualities or properties. We get an early version of this from Bishop Berkeley, actually, who wrote, as several of these qualities are observed to accompany each other, they come to be marked by one name, and so to be reputed as one thing. Thus, for example, a certain color, taste, smell, figure, and consistence having been observed to go together are accounted one distinct thing, signified by the name apple. So in this case, he's talking about an apple. Let's substitute the apple for the coffee cup example, where we have, this thing, a bundle of qualities. It's got its shape. It's got uh, certain characteristics like solidity, volume. Um, if we take everything away one by one, we're just left with nothing. But because we observe them all together consistently, we start to think of this as like one thing, even though it's actually really just a bundle of different properties. Later on, Hume would write this. He would say, I would fain to ask those philosophers who found so much of their reasonings on the distinction of substance and accident. Accident here means accidental attribute. And imagine we have clear ideas of each, whether the idea of substance be derived from impressions of sensation or reflection, introspection, that is, observation of one's own mind. If it be conveyed to us by the senses, I ask which of them, after what manner. So Hume is saying what I said earlier here. Like, you think you're perceiving substance with your senses? Okay, tell me which ones. You can't. It's actually derived from a kind of reflective exercise, right? And when we do that, we might be making the same sort of mistake that Berkeley is pointing to. Um, and Hume went further than this. He also argued that even if we could directly perceive substratum, substance as substratum with the senses, it would just be another quality. It wouldn't be substance. It would be something else. So he boldly concludes, we therefore have no idea of substance distinct from a particular collection or distinct from a collection of particular qualities, nor have we any other meaning when we talk of reason concerning it. Let's just go to the chat. Um, I wouldn't say that necessarily. And the reason is that Locke is also an empiricist. So Locke is he's using reason to derive this idea of substratum, substance as substratum, but it starts with sense experience for Locke. So again, look at this. Subtract away all of the qualities, all of the properties, and you get whatever holds them all together. So he's deducing the existence of substance as substratum, but it starts with the senses. So it's not an a priori idea, but it is an idea arrived at by reason. So you're close, Pernille. Don't worry, Yusuf. I'm going to continue explaining. Um, so objects on bundle theory are just bundles of qualities. They're not discrete objects. Let's try and do this with some everyday objects. What's an everyday object that we could apply bundle theory to? Yeah, sure, a cup. Well, we've been doing the cup, but let's continue. Like, okay, so what are the qualities of the cup? Its shape. Well, first let's start with its color. It's white, it's green, it's got some writing on it. Take those away. What do you have? Well, just a white cup. Now take away its color. Now you just have a cup, the shape of a cup that has a volume. Now take those away. What do you have? Nothing, right? You have nothing. Likewise, a book. Take away everything one by one from the book, and you're left with nothing. The words on the pages, take those away. Now you've just got a book with paper. Take the paper away. Now you've just got a cover. Take the cover away. Now you're left with nothing. So the book is just a bundle of all of these together. The sensible qualities are what we're talking about here, Khalid, rather than like functions. Aristotle would be interested in the function, like it's telos, its end or purpose, but not here. Yeah, likewise a pen. Take away all the parts of the pen one by one, and you're not left with some substance that holds them all together. You're just left with nothing. Yeah, like Yusuf, think of it like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle. Like the image of a jigsaw puzzle is made out of all of the individual pieces, right? And you can say like, oh, in that puzzle, it's a picture of, I don't know, a boat, right? Once it's put all together, you're like, that's a boat. But actually, it's a whole bunch of pieces put together. Now, on bundle theory, everything is like that. There is no boat, just a bundle of the qualities that are put together in the way that we sort of, notice and say, oh, that's a boat. As we'll see in the chapter on personal identity and the self, this can even apply to people. And I don't mean our bodies, although it could. I mean persons, selves. So Zane asks, why are we allowed to strip traits and consider those traits as singular, like removing the color from something, implying that color is its own thing, but can't consider a system clearly meant to be one thing as one? For example, a human to me shouldn't be stripped further, like removing the skin, so on. Yeah. Well, we don't generally, when we say that even persons could be like this, we don't mean the parts of their bodies, but rather um, those aspects of their minds that make them the people that they are. Right. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but you feel like you're the same person you were yesterday, correct? This is for Zane or also for anybody. But you feel like you get up and you're like, yep, I'm still me, right? It feels like you continuously exist, even though you've sort of popped out of existence in a certain sense when you were asleep, when you were unconscious. Now, Hume is going to say something like, well, there isn't really a you. You're a bundle of memories, ideas, sense impressions, and those sorts of things. But there's no unified, continuously existing, independently existing entity that is you. Mhm. Yeah, Sean, that's a good point. You're right. Like the body renews itself over time. So the cells I'm made of now are completely different than the ones I was made out of a decade ago. It's a set of things that Lisa, that's close. Bundle theory says that these things are bundles of lots of little things rather than whole, discrete things. Well, a bundle of nothing is just nothing, but we're not one thing. We're bundles of other things. So are objects. That's what Hume is arguing. There's no substance that ties it all together. Substance is just this thing that we don't need to posit. Remember Occam's razor? Right? Do not multiply entities beyond necessity. I think somebody who wished to apply that here would say, that's what Hume is doing. Hume is saying we don't need substance. Things can just be bundles of properties. Hume would say the soul is just the mind, and the mind is a bundle. That's what Hume would say. Well, we're not we're not like torturing people, right? I'm not like deleting parts of your mind when I do this. It's an imaginative exercise, right? But the soul is a good idea, right? Like a lot of people would identify the soul with the self. Um, and it seems like you are the same self that you were yesterday. Um, that you've sort of continuously existed as the same being, even though there's this gap in the middle where you go to sleep every night and you cease to be conscious. But when you wake up, it's not like you're a brand new person. Why does it feel like you're the same person? Well, because there's a continuity, and this is Locke's idea. There's a continuity of memory, right? That makes you you. And Hume would say, Well, those memories are part of the bundle that makes you you. So rather than like a soul, a sort of ghost in the machine, as it were, that is really you, and that perhaps survives the death of the body and so forth. Rather than that, for Hume, you yourself are a bundle of memories, ideas, impressions, etc. So that's bundle theory. But there's a concern, and maybe some of you have been a little concerned about this, right? In the course of asking these questions. Um, on bundle theory, there's no essential attributes, right? Remember, for Aristotle, there were. For human beings, it's reason, right? But there's an essential attribute that makes a thing what it is, an essential quality. But on bundle theory, every quality is taken to be essential because there is no substance, there is no substratum. And that means that if objects are constituted by their qualities and not some underlying substance, then one simple change changes the identity of that object. So, like, that's an advantage of the substance view, of each of the substance views that we've looked at. Um, that those views can explain how objects remain the same, even if they're changed, right? That can explain why you remain maybe the same person you are now as you were 10 years ago, because it appeals to something essential about you. It could be a chain of memories, it could be your particular DNA, right? But on bundle theory, it doesn't work like that. If I change one thing, then I've changed the object. So if I have a bookshelf, this is the example Crumley uses. So I actually do have a bookshelf at home. It's like blue. So if I paint it red, somebody like Locke is going to say, well, it's the same bookshelf. It's just red now. Um, but a bundle theorist would say, well, now you have a different bookshelf because none of its attributes are essential for defining what it is, which means they all kind of have to be. So if I change one, I change the object. It's now a different bookshelf, which sounds pretty counterintuitive to a lot of people. Now, what does Hume say we should do? He says, well, don't worry about it. Just accept that changing one of the qualities changes the object. I don't know. Can you do that? Like if I paint my blue bookshelf red and I say, this is my new bookshelf, do you accept that? Well, no, it would be a different collection of books every time, perhaps, but the bookshelf would be the same. Uh, I kind of see the connection you're going for there, but I don't think, because the butterfly effect is a chaos theory thing. It doesn't really have to do with metaphysics or ontology. But I see what you're doing there. Yeah, maybe, Pernille. Maybe it's not that all of the qualities are essential, but some are maybe a little more important than others. Think back to when we were talking about universals and we learned about the notion of family resemblance, like resemblance nominalism. Maybe it's something like that. But when it comes to qualities or properties, yeah, you kind of messed up at the end. Yeah, well, that's what Hume says. He says, don't worry about it. It's a different bookshelf, but who cares? It's a different bookshelf because Hume thought that we just imagine some underlying substance that continuously exists over time that holds all the properties together. That's just something we imagine or that we infer. It's not something we directly perceive with the senses. So it's not a thing. So Sean says, um, it seems like they have things backwards. Things do fundamentally, atomically exist, and their properties come from how they exist. Feels like saying when objects fall down, they pull the force of gravity behind them. Um, right. He's not saying the properties don't exist, like hardness doesn't exist. He's not saying that. He's saying that there are hard objects, but their hardness isn't what makes them what they are. It's the whole bundle of properties together. Does that make sense? We're not talking about substances anymore, right? There are no substances. I think Hume would deny that atoms as we know them today are substances. Um, but who knows? Then again, he's responding to a very particular claim about substance. Um, it's Locke's view that he's responding to. Um, Maybe ultimately he's like a materialist. He would say, sure, there's material substance, but when it comes to complicated objects, there's no substance as substratum that makes them what they are, right? Like Hume is what we call an inessentialist. So there's no one quality. If you're an inessentialist, you believe there's no one particular quality that's essential for a being to be that particular thing. It's the opposite of a view that we call essentialism. So actually, we've got the time. We could probably do a little exercise. We could do it about people. What is the let's cover essentialism first. What is the essential feature of the human being? Just go ahead. Just tell me something you think is essential for being a human being. A soul, empathy, good. A heart, opposable thumbs, the right brain, soul again, yeah. Thinking, blood. Well, so let's look at a few of these. Body, you mean the human body. So, other creatures have hearts, empathy, opposable thumbs, and blood, and bodies. So, what's the essential feature of the human? Soul is a good one. Mind is a good one. Yes. DNA, maybe, or reason. So, if you're an essentialist, currency, I mean something about us, like about our being. Yeah, morality is a good one. Maybe introspection. Yeah, symbolic and complex language is a good one. So these are all good candidates for essential human characteristics. So if you're an essentialist, you're probably going to pick one of those. You're going to say like it's our DNA, it's our mind, it's our reason, it's our language, it's our morality. Free will is another one, right? Maybe it's that we have free will. Maybe it's the soul. Um, which I guess is responsible on many traditions for reason, language, morality, and free will, right? So if you're an essentialist, you might say it's one of those, probably the soul or some aspect of soul that makes you a human being. But an inessentialist would say, well, no one of those is any more important than the other. A human being is like a collection of things, like reason, language, free will, opposable thumbs, the right DNA, etc. So that's inessentialism versus essentialism. And Hume is certainly an inessentialist. And this means that we could have humans that have most of these, and then humans that have Again, most of these, but certain other ones. So I'm a human being that uses language, but there are some human beings that don't use language, right? There might be people in comas or vegetative states. There are people on like nonverbal folks on the autism spectrum, um, but we don't count them as not human because they don't speak. Yeah, Sean, good example, right? Like psychopaths are said to lack empathy. They're they're said to lack in particular something called affective empathy, which is about feeling what someone else is feeling, as opposed to like cognitive empathy, which is about knowing what people are thinking. Psychopaths actually have very high levels of cognitive empathy, but they use that to exploit people because they don't have affective empathy. That's right. So the dark triad, that's not just psychopathy, that's also narcissism and Machiavellianism. Narcissism can be a full-blown personality disorder, but Machiavellianism is more like a character trait. But we say they lack empathy, but they're still humans, right? So, for an inessentialist, there's no one thing. Like if you had all of the conditions, all of the possible essential conditions for humanity, and then you took two people and kind of drew lines around their characteristics that they have, you'd end up with something like a Venn diagram, I would think. So that's inessentialism versus essentialism. What would a bundle theorist do with kinds? Remember kinds from Aristotle? Like Aristotle talked about natural kinds. What are natural kinds? Let's refresh our memory. Well, in a certain sense, so Hyla, yeah, like imagine I was a mad scientist. Um, but rather than make you lose your mind, like in the sense of making you insane, imagine what I actually did was I rewrote your memories. So I take someone else's memories and then I delete all your memories and then I copy the memories of someone else into your brain. Now there's a sense in which you seem like a different person, right? You see what I mean? Mm, no, I don't think so. He would say somebody, well, I don't know exactly what Hume would say, but Derek Parfit, who wrote a lot about this stuff, would say the correct number of persons is none. Um, because persons are not beings. We talk about people, and that's just a feature of our language. But persons are not these discrete, continually existing things. Yeah. And Hume would say the same. Like I'm a person in the sense that I can refer to like, hey, Josh, yes, that's me, right? But ultimately, I'm a bundle. So even if there are two persons in my head, I just have two bundles. Or maybe one bundle that shows itself from various sides or aspects. But natural kinds, what are natural kinds? Let's refresh our memory. What are those? Aristotle talked about them. Natural kinds give us a sort of taxonomy of the natural world, right? There are various kind of like mind independent things or ways of classifying objects, and the ways we do that are real. This taxonomy would exist if there was no one around to make it. Yeah, but a chair is an artifact. So I mean like natural kinds. Yeah, water would be a natural kind. Birds, perhaps. Mammals, various examples of different bird or mammalian species would be natural kinds, right? How would a bundle theorist identify kinds? Yep, yep. I mean, I think you could say that. That's what Aristotle was going for, I think, with his theory of elements. Of course, Aristotle didn't know about all of the chemical elements we do. He thought that there were only four elements, right? He thought water was an element. It's not an element. It's a chemical made of two other elements, right? Hydrogen and oxygen. But we could say hydrogen and oxygen are natural kinds. Yeah. So, um, what would a bundle theorist do with this? Well, maybe they would say you just choose a set of properties and decide that this is the set of the properties that this kind of thing is. So kinds are not natural, but there can still be kinds. But then again, the critics would reply that we don't really have much to go on here when it comes to categorizing things because there are no kind defining qualities. I mean, if there are no kind defining qualities, then the way we categorize things into kinds is kind of arbitrary, isn't it? That's what a critic would say. What would we do with two objects with the same qualities? Think about it. If I have two, I don't know, brand new philosophy textbooks, they're both hot off the presses. They don't have any distinguishing features yet. You know, neither of them have been marked up by philosophy students who are studying the material. Neither of them have any wear and tear from being taken to and from campus. Nobody's written their names on the what do you call it, the fly leaf or whatever, right? So how do we distinguish between these two identical books with identical qualities? The bundles are identical for each object, but we understand them as two different objects. What does bundle theory do there? Um, the author seems to think that distinguishing them via their temporal or spatial locations doesn't work, but I'm not so sure about that. I think temporal and spatial relations will do the work here, but the worry maybe is that um, these are not qualities of the objects. I say so be it. Maybe it's not the qualities of the objects that distinguish them, but their spatial temporal relations. And I'm fine with that. But I don't know. What do you think? Yeah, maybe like who has the book? Well, no one has the book just yet. But over time, someone's going to have one of the books and someone's going to have the other one, right? Well, for the purposes of this thought experiment, we'll just stipulate that we have a perfect printing press and it doesn't, there's absolutely no variation, or at least no variation that matters to us. I mean, even if the books were like 0.00001% different, we can't tell. We're not that good, right? So, um, there's a couple ways we can deal with that. We can just say it's not a problem or it's not a problem, but for different reasons. But maybe we can use trope theory. Remember trope theory? Trope theory says that there aren't universal kinds, but there are like lots of particularized kinds. So there is no universal green, but there's lots of little particularized greens, lots of little tropes. So if we merge bundle theory and trope theory, maybe we can individuate objects with identical qualities. We could just say, well, this philosophy textbook is this collection of particularized kinds, and this one is a different collection of particularized kinds. So they're both identical in terms of how they appear to us, but they're not identical because they're composed of different tropes. They're different bundles of tropes. But then we're kind of back to where we were at the beginning. Like, what is it that holds it all together? Bundle theorists would say nothing. Substance theorists won't be satisfied with that. They'll have to say either there's primary substance or substance, like as in substratum, that's holding all the properties together. But then again, maybe there are some other approaches we could take here. And before we get to those, because they are weird, I want to stop and see if you have any questions. Because we're about to dive into some really abstract stuff that's going to get tricky. Bundle theory would say that um, it's still the same ship, I think. So the ship of Theseus is an old thought experiment, and we're going to talk about it more later when we talk about the self. Um, but if I have some ship, and I have to gradually replace the parts, the question is whether it remains the same ship. I think a bundle theorist would say, yeah, yeah, it does. But we're going to talk about this in greater depth later in the class. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, although that is a really good question. Um, Tropes are little individual particularized kinds. So again, there's no universal green on trope theory. There's this green, that green. They're little particular universals, like lowercase u universals, not capital U universals. Co-presence. What do you mean, Khalid? What's co-presence? I still I still don't know what that is. Uh, can you like explain what you mean? It doesn't matter if the term is right or wrong. Like, what do you have in mind when you say that? The state of existing with other elements at the same time. Um, well, whether we consider them part of the same thing or separate things is going to be again kind of arbitrary for the bundle theorist, right? I mean, I see lots of qualities on the seat that I'm sitting on occurring at the same time, and I assume that they're all part of the same object. But Hume would say it's just a bundle. But if my coffee cup fell on the couch, I wouldn't then say the coffee cup is part of the couch. And maybe the reason we're like, maybe these divisions are arbitrary. Maybe it's trope theory that's saving us, but it really depends, I think. All right, let's move on to the tricky stuff. So now we're going to talk about Alfred North Whitehead, who was an American philosopher, big interest in logic and mathematics. He wrote with Bertrand Russell, the Principia Mathematica, not not Newton's. Theirs was rather an attempt to ground mathematics in logic. Um, he was also Quine's supervisor at Harvard. We've talked a lot about Quine. Well, this is his doctoral supervisor. Now, his views are tricky. Um, Whitehead views everything, even God, in terms of process and event. So he says here that all things flow is the first vague generalization which the unsystematized, barely analyzed intuition of men has produced. Without doubt, if we are to go back to that ultimate integral experience, the flux of things is one ultimate generalization around which we must weave our philosophical system. But there is a rival notion, antithetical to this. The other notion dwells on the permanencies of things. So this earlier sort of intuition that all things flow is replaced by the notion, which is antithetical to it, that there is a permanence to all things. What does it mean to say all things flow? Well, ever stepped into a river? What's that saying? Something about rivers and stepping into them. How's that go again? Somebody jump in the chat and tell me. Yeah, constant change. What's the saying? Yeah, you can't step in the same river twice. That's right, Jaden. That's exactly right. And this is from Heraclitus, an ancient Greek thinker. You can't step into the same river twice because the river's changed and you have changed. You are continuously flowing, just like the river. Um, that's the first view that Whitehead is talking about. Not Heraclitus specifically, but that idea that things flow. Um, the idea that's antithetical to that is that there is a permanence to things, that it is the same river and it is the same person stepping into it. But for Whitehead, he takes the former view, and as he says, tries to weave his philosophy around this. So the essence of things is what Whitehead calls their process, which is a continual becoming. Um, he calls this sort of nature of reality is continuously becoming, continuously in process. He calls that duration, and he describes it all in a book called Process and Reality. Yes, it does mention that Quine was a student of Whitehead's, I mean. Uh, so reality, its nature is duration, and the essence of things is their process, their continual becoming. It's not about essential characteristics, but the fact that everything is constantly flowing, constantly becoming. Well, what it's actually saying, Yusuf, if I understand this correctly, is that what makes things what they are is that they are continuously becoming. Yeah. And I know that's can be difficult to kind of wrap your brain around. But let's continue. So reality is this creative flow of actual entities, and these actual entities exist in process. I think it makes sense. Again, think of a river. You've got lots of rivers around here, right? We're bordered by the Rideau River and the Rideau Canal here on the Carleton campus. Now, is the Rideau River the same river it was yesterday? What do you think, Yusuf? Is it? Yes or no? Yeah. But is it the same water in the river? No, not the same water. It's water from somewhere else, at least on our little slice of the river by the campus here. Now, Whitehead would say, well, that's just what it is to be a river, to be continuously flowing and changing. The water is different from day to day. The life forms that you see living in and around the river change. Um, that's just what it is to be a river. And everything is like that for Whitehead. Yeah. So you are what you are because of this continual process. So there's still an essential nature, but the essential nature is process. It is change over time. And that's why, even though you've grown up, you've learned more things, the cells in your body have replaced themselves over and over a couple of times within all of your lifetimes. That's why we can say you are all the same people as you were before, even though you're not the same people, strictly speaking. What makes you you is this process of continually becoming. I think so. Although I don't think Whitehead emphasizes time as much as the next guy does, but I think time is important. It's kind of implicitly baked into what he's saying here, right? Um, so our experience of the world for Whitehead, just back to the chat, seems to be stuck here. Ah, uh, maybe the relationship between the durations. Well, duration is just how he describes the nature of reality. And that's again where you can see how time, like the notion of time, is kind of cooked in. Um, but sure, things cause other things. Um, maybe the causal effects that happen, um, that certain things experience is a part of what makes them what they are. But we'll get there. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Um, so reality is the creative flow of these actual entities. This duration um, of actual entities that are continuously in process. Creative here doesn't mean it's being created by an agent, at least not in the traditional sense. Um, and each of us has a duration. It's our experience of the world. Our present experience of the world, what I'm doing now, for example, lecturing to you, is a novel expression of my past experiencing. What I've learned about philosophy and how to teach it, kind of re-expressing itself in a new way to you. The creative flow is part of the process of becoming for every entity in the universe. Yeah. I'm sorry if this sounds mystical. I mean, it does sound a bit mystical, right? So my experience is a process. Um, And a big part of this for Whitehead is my re-expression of past experience, which again, I like to think of as like what I'm doing here. I'm re-expressing past experience, things I've learned in my education, in prepping for this course, in prepping for this particular class. I'm re-expressing that to all of you now. And that is part of my being what I am. Very mystical, but it's kind of cool, right? I like this. And I like to make sense of it. Again, Crumley kind of mentions this too, but one way we can make sense of this is with a little bit of a comparison with William James. So let's bring it back to the notion of the self, which I know we haven't really talked much about. We will talk about it in its own unit, I think, after the upcoming unit on the nature of the mind. Um, but when it comes to what the self is, like for Whitehead, what I am is this flowing creative expressing and re-expressing of past experience. For James, Okay, so Khalid says revisiting previous stages. It's not, you're not even revisiting them. Like I'm not thinking like, oh, remember that time I learned about Socrates? It's not even that. It's that I am what I am because of what has happened in the past. And my being now is a re-expression of that. Creative just means, I think in this context, it just means like what happens. What happens novelly, novel events. That's what Whitehead means by creative flow. So Whitehead talks about God, but it's not um no, I don't think so. I don't think that's what he's going for. That kind of determinism. Um he's trying to find an essential nature, and that essential nature is not substance. It's process. But to get back to my point, creative, like he does talk about God, but it's not like God is sitting, up in the sky going, I'm going to create some stuff. Boom, there it is. Like I'm going to create Josh, and he'll be a philosophy professor, and he'll be, you know, tall, brown hair, with a kind of goofy demeanor, right? That's not what we mean by creative here. What we mean is that, my what I am is a sort of continual unfolding, and that unfolding is what the creative draws our attention to. Does that make sense to you, Natalie? So it's not like an agentive creation. It's the novel re-expression side of things that is the creative part. Okay, back to William James. So James, in talking about the self, thought the self, James is kind of like a bundle theorist. James thought the self is just like a series of thoughts. And thoughts here we can understand as anything from like thoughts that you think to memories, to sense impressions, to ideas, any kind of mental state, like call it a thought. Selves are like a series of thoughts, like pearls on a string, but they're united by the thought, which is a sort of meta thought that unites all of the other thoughts. Like as if you had a pearl necklace, or, some people have those prayer beads, and, you go one bead at a time. So imagine that each bead is a thought, a mental event, but the motion here is the thought kind of moving through it all. That's what the self is like for James. Similarly, each little tiny duration is an actual entity. So duration is not just a period of time, to go back to this slide. It's the nature of reality, but it is it refers to, like, a duration can refer to each little particular novel expression in the world as this whole process unfolds. And each of those little durations is an actual um, entity. I think Crumley invites us to think of the water churning at the bottom of a waterfall. Um, you could take snapshots of it. Those snapshots would be like the little moments, the little durations. And any entity, any actual entity, is a microcosm of the entire universe, connected to the entirety of the whole universe. So there's a creative flow in all things. I like to think here of the web of Indra, or the net of Indra. Do you guys know this? Indra is a god in Hinduism. He's pretty sick, actually. He's got a war elephant. He lives on a mountain, and he has a thunderbolt. So he's kind of like Zeus or Thor or somebody like that, right? But apparently, over his palace, he's got this web or net, and it's full of jewels. And each jewel reflects a little bit of every other jewel. And Whitehead's philosophy sounds to me like that. I don't know if Whitehead knew anything about Hinduism or ancient Indian philosophy, um, but it sure sounds like it. So does that help make sense of this to all of you? Like the whole of existence is this web full of all of these precious stones, and each of them in their facets reflects every other stone, what's reflected in every other stone. That's the sense in which actual entities are like little microcosms of the entire reality of the universe. Well, the net of Indra is the example. Yes, Sean, good point. Like Spinoza is a, depending who you ask, he's either a pantheist or a panentheist, right? Spinoza says that God, he says God or nature, same thing, same thing. So if you're a pantheist, what you think is that God is just the universe. A panentheist says God is like he is the universe, but he's like immanent within the universe. And um, that kind of sounds like what Whitehead is talking about. God is not an entity. Maybe God is the whole process. You can think of it also similar, like I mentioned, the net or the web of Indra. I mean, think of Brahman, right? Again, I don't know if you're all familiar with ancient Indian philosophy, but Brahman is like the world's soul, the cosmos, God, whatever you want to call it. And we are little individual entities, but that's an illusion. We're actually all part of Brahman. We're all aspects of it. Similar thing is going on here. Yeah, process and reality enter the public domain. Get yourself a copy or something, and strap in because it's going to prove challenging. But I think it's really interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff. You don't often see stuff like this in so-called Western philosophy. This is the kind of thing you tend to see more in Eastern philosophy, right? So very cool. And some of you have got ideas for your essays just from talking about this. That is cool. By the way, did you see there's a list of topics available in the helpful materials module? Did you guys all see that? I got about 10 topics for you. Yeah, hopefully it's helpful. I think it should be somewhat helpful. Um, and if you're still stuck, you can reach out at any time. Okay, how are we doing for time? Pretty good. So the becoming of an entity like me or you involves eternal objects, which you can think of as universals, and feelings. So one thing you're going to notice about this, if you're reading the bits that are quoted in Crumley, or if you decide to read Process and Reality on your own, is that Whitehead uses his own vernacular. So there are universals, but there are eternal objects, and then there's feeling or feelings. Yeah, you want to you don't think of it as proving it. Think about it like in terms of convincing the reader that you are correct, that your thesis is correct. Yeah. Okay. So although Whitehead kind of sounds a bit like a bundle theorist, he really does think that there's a university in the unity, bleh, in the combination of eternal objects, and the unity is found in the process, the continual unfolding. And this, your essence, my essence, the essence of any being is the final aim of its process, the process of getting there, which is called subjective aim, the aim of existing subjects like you or I. Um, and again, kind of like the analogy I made with Brahman, the world soul. Every actual entity is a drop of experience. He doesn't mean like first person experience. Um, Again, it's very mystical. Um, it's not always conscious. So this is a technical term in this case. It doesn't mean that this chair in its being feels me sitting on it in the sense that I feel the chair on my rear as I sit on it, right? It doesn't mean that. Um, Again, a drop of experience, you know, Brahman, the world soul, is like the ocean, and all of us are like the spray that comes off a wave as it crashes on the beach. And it looks like, oh, look, we're all little droplets that exist independently. But you know what? In a rather short time, we fall back into the ocean. We become the ocean again. So let's say I look at this tree. Oh, actually, look, most of the leaves have fallen off of that tree that I was looking at last time. When I sense the tree outside, I'm feeling the tree consciously. And the tree, Whitehead would say, feels me too, but not consciously. The tree simply reflects a world where I sense the tree. Again, like gems in the net of Indra, right? It's just that I happen to be conscious of my feeling. The tree doesn't. Yeah, it's very cool. So feeling goes both way. It's a matter of degree, but just remember that not all feeling is conscious. Um, all beings, Whitehead says, house the world within themselves, which I like. Oh man, that's so like, whoa, dude, you know? Like one is all is one kind of thing. All of these things are connected intrinsically and not extrinsically, which is what many metaphysicians, that's people who do metaphysics, had supposed in the history of philosophy. And I'm sure this sounds maybe quite beautiful to some of you and weird to others, and perhaps scary and confusing to yet others. But don't worry. Yes, Praneel. Yes. Yes. I think so. In the sense that I reflect the universe and I am reflected in the universe. There's a sort of oneness to everything on this view, right? So I think it's pretty cool. I wish more Anglo-American philosophers who by and large are associated with that analytic tradition, the analytic continental divide. I wish that more of them dared to philosophize like this. And in any case, that analytic continental distinction is to a great extent nonsense. Um, anyway, speaking of the continental, let's hop over to Martin Heidegger, who is a controversial figure, as I'll tell you about later. Now, Heidegger, he made very big contributions to metaphysics and ontology within that continental tradition. He casts a very long shadow. He influenced 20th century existentialist thought. So Sartre, de Beauvoir. Um, a lot of his students went on to be famous philosophers in their own right, like Hannah Arendt and Hans-Georg Gadamer. But the thing about Heidegger is that he was also a Nazi. He was a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party until the day it ceased to exist. Now, why do I say that? Well, it's true, and I want to disclose the truth to you. We don't study Heidegger because of his political affiliations, and his political affiliations were very, very unfortunate. And indeed, as a person, Heidegger probably not a good one. Um, but he does have some interesting things to say. So that's my little content warning. Yes, I know. Yeah, yeah, Hannah Arendt not just studied under him, had an affair with him, a long-running affair. So yeah. Now he wasn't, like a member of the SS putting people on trains to the camps or anything, but he was a defender of Nazi ideology, right? So he's not innocent in his involvement with this. But let's bracket that. I'm going to circle back to that. In Being and Time, probably his most famous work, Heidegger argued that philosophy had forgotten the question of being. Philosophy, especially ontology, had become more about beings, lowercase b, beings, than being itself, capital B, being. And that's what Heidegger was interested in. Uh, he thought that our preoccupation with trying to understand individual beings, very much along the lines of what we've been doing here, beings like coffee cups, trees, persons, etc. Our preoccupation with these questions hides the being itself. It hides the being of these beings. That is being as being. Here in Latin, being qua being, right? Or not in Latin, but the Quae means it's just Latin for as. So being as being. We might say that perhaps we've been focused on the ontic level of analysis when what Heidegger wants is for us to be focused on the ontological level. So I'm preoccupied with chairs, tables, coffee cups, persons, Kermit the Frog, etc. And I'm not asking questions about being itself. It's hidden because of my preoccupation with beings. But Heidegger wants to understand being as being. Being, capital B being, is what gives beings their being. And, if you were having trouble with Whitehead, you read Heidegger and it's all just like, yes, being is the being of beings. And you're like, what? Huh? It's a little helpful that in most translations of Heidegger, they retain the capitalization that he uses. Like in German, um, nouns are capitalized, right? So if I'm talking about just some random being, that's the lowercase being. But if I'm talking about being itself in German, that would be um, capitalized. So like what is it? Sign, SEIN is always going to be capitalized. Um, you say that, but then Heidegger had a weird dialect, and like Whitehead, he also has his own vocabulary. So even if you read him in German, you still kind of have to learn his vernacular, you know? Heidegger might say yes. And Heidegger tries to change the language to make thinking clearer, to make thinking about being clearer. That's why he uses the particular vernacular the way he does. Whether this actually makes it clearer really depends, I think, on the reader. Like, how much Heidegger are you willing to read? It does get clearer the more you read, but most people are like, I don't want to read Heidegger. So, um, and there's a particular kind of being for whom the question of being is a question. Heidegger calls it Dasein, which means their being. And Dasein is the human being. So I am Dasein. You are Dasein. We are their beings, as in we're being in a world, right? So that's the human being. So Dasein is the kind of being for whom the question of being, that is, what is the nature of capital B being? Dasein is the being for whom that question is a question. We can ask questions of capital B being. No other creature can. That's why we both are and we have Dasein. So you can think of the human being as the kind of being to whom being, capital B being, discloses or reveals itself to us, right? So for Heidegger, this is what truth consists in, the disclosing or the presencing of beings. For Heidegger, truth is not about true propositions. Right. We've talked about this before. Like, what is a fact? A fact is a true proposition about the world. What is a proposition? It's a sentence about the world that can have a truth value. So there is a coffee cup on my desk. That is true, just in case there's a coffee cup on the desk. And lo and behold, wh where is it? Oh, there it is. Look at that. It's on my desk. So that's a true proposition. Heidegger would say, no, that's a correct proposition. He kind of draws this distinction between truth and correctness. And truth always has to do with the disclosing or revealing or the presencing of beings. And being can withdraw, again, because we could be preoccupied with particular beings rather than capital B being, or because we enframe the world in the wrong way. Incidentally, our present way of enframing the world is technological. Heidegger would say, you might say, but wait, haven't we always had technology? Like the ancient Greeks had technology, didn't they? Heidegger would say, no, they didn't. They had techne, they had craft. But we have technology because technology is our modern way of enframing the world. This word enframe comes from the German Gestell, which means like a bookcase. So our technological worldview enframes the world in a certain way. So a forest is not just like raw being or a bunch of beings. It becomes standing reserve, just timber. It's just resources to be consumed. It's timber. The land is maybe then going to be farmland. Maybe we look at what's under the land. There's valuable minerals. It's no longer being's being. It's raw material. This is the way that the technological framework makes us look at the world and changes, therefore, how being discloses itself to us. So just to the chat, special, yes, yes. I mean, again, when we say like for Heidegger, language is what makes the human being essentially human. I don't know if it's just language. It's not just language. It's our ability to ask the question of being specifically. Like, what is being? Not what is this being? What is this being? But what is being itself? Yeah, very German way of looking at the world. Yeah, maybe it's a language thing. I mean, I don't know. Um, the sort of presencing of being is Heidegger gets it from the Greek. Like the root of our word poetry is poiesis, and that's like a revealing, a disclosing. But he gets that from Greek, not German. So the being of the forest in this case is presented as standing reserve, but otherwise it's withdrawn. The forest as a place of beauty is withdraws. The forest as the subject of a beautiful poem or of a beautiful painting withdraws because we just look at the world uh, through the technological framework. I mean, for all of the things that are problematic about Heidegger, and there are a lot of them, um, One thing that I think he's right about is what technology, the technological outlook does to us. The supreme irony of Heidegger is that after the atrocities of the Nazis became widely known, the Holocaust, um, Heidegger didn't say, I'm sorry. Heidegger didn't say, look, this technological framework even extends and encompasses and subsumes humans. No, he didn't do that. He kind of copped out. He said in his final interview, which was published after his death, that he would have apologized for his views if Hitler had apologized to the German people. And that is, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. That is the biggest cop out in the history of philosophy. So, but he does have some important things to say about technology, which I think are worth paying attention to, and that's why we're talking about him. Yeah, well, because it's the blood and soil stuff, right? Heidegger's like, no, you can't look at the field as standing reserve. It's a place where people live and where they being discloses itself and they are being in the world. And what's the best way to do that? Apparently the Aryan way, if you're Heidegger. And that's where it starts to get problematic, right? Um, I don't know. Then like Samar maybe, but then like it's weird because Heidegger, his PhD supervisor, his mentor was Edmund Husserl, who was a very famous Jewish scholar, and pretty much all of Heidegger's best students were Jewish. So it's like what was going on with this guy, you know? Yeah. He was the sort of anti-Semitic like where it was like, you know how people say that they can't be racist because they have a person of color as a friend? He was like that. I can't be anti-Semitic. I have Jewish students. It's like, yeah, but you can, though, still be anti-Semitic, right? Yeah, yeah. Like he wasn't, it's not like he was cruel to particular Jewish people. He had a problem with what he saw as, I guess, essential traits of the Jewish people. That's what made him anti-Semitic. And by the way, there was a long history of anti-Semitism in Europe that, I mean, Heidegger probably grew up with this. Um, it didn't all just start with Hitler. You know, Unfortunately, a lot of anti-Semitism for a long, long time, uh, long before then. Oh my goodness, we're running out of time. It's 12:54. Okay, well, real quick, there are these various modes of presentation of beings. One is ready to hand, like when you use a tool. It's like an extension of your body, or like when you take a sip from a delicious cup of coffee. The other is present at hand. That's when the tool breaks. And that's the view where we analyze things objectively. Our primary way of engaging with the world is ready to hand, not present at hand. Engaging in the world with other beings. Um, I think I've already said most of what's on this last slide, but it's worth reiterating. Bad people can do good philosophy. Good people can do bad philosophy. I think it is more important to be a good person. Um, Heidegger was actually banned from teaching for 6 years, um, because of his support for Nazism and his involvement in the Nazi Party. Um, Again, his mentor and his most successful students were all Jewish. He didn't have a problem with individual Jewish people that he knew. He had a problem with, the sort of idea of Jewishness, which is why he was a Nazi. And it's hugely problematic. Um, why do we talk about these awful people? Heidegger's not the only one. Um, as we discussed previously, Aristotle thought certain people were rationally inclined to be slaves. The early Immanuel Kant was quite racist. Not later Kant, but earlier Kant. At least Kant changed his views as he got older and wiser. Um, to say that Heidegger's ideas are bad because he was bad would be to commit an ad hominem fallacy. We can criticize his Nazi views while critically examining his philosophy. And indeed, even though I think he was a terrible person, I think some of what he says about technology, if read and applied the right way, doesn't have to lead to the sorts of places he was led to. And that's why Heidegger is actually discussed in environmental philosophy to this day. So we better end it there because I've got another class that I need to get to. And Jaden, that's a great point. Why do we study these people? We don't want to be them. We can learn something from Heidegger, from Aristotle. It's not just the positive things they say. We can learn what not to be by studying them. It's a very famous expression that I learned from my father, actually. Everyone is my superior, or everyone is my teacher, in that I might learn something from them. And that could be the way that you learn from me, like me telling you things, but it can also be learning how not to be. So, yeah, that's why we study all this. That's why we don't cancel Heidegger. And also, I mean, come on, he's dead. If this were a living philosopher, I think it would be a different story. Like, I don't want to maybe put money in his pocket by having people buy his texts if he's alive. But he's dead. He's not going to come back and hurt us. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you next time. Uh, I don't have time to tell you about Zizek. I have to tell you next time. Remind me next time. I've got another class to get to. But I'll see you all next time. Yep, there was a coercive element, Galen. You're right. But let's bring this to the Discord server. I'm happy to continue this, but I've got to go. Okay. See you all next time.